Hi and welcome back to Reddit Whispers. I've been a long-time lurker, an occasional commenter but never a poster. I guess I never felt like I had a story worth telling, or maybe I just preferred the quiet comfort of anonymity, the silent observer in a world of digital confessions. But life, as it often does, has a funny way of throwing a wrench in your plans, of turning your quiet little world upside down and shaking it until all the loose change and forgotten secrets come rattling out. And boy, did I find some secrets. So here I am, stepping out of the shadows and into the dim, confessional light of your earbuds. I'm not even sure where to begin, to be honest. It's like trying to describe the color of the sky to someone who's been blind since birth. Where do you even start when the very foundation of your reality has crumbled beneath your feet, revealing a chasm of lies and deceit you never knew existed? I guess I'll start with the day it all fell apart, a Tuesday, which is ironic because Tuesdays are supposed to be boring. They're the unassuming, middle-of-the-road day of the week, the one you forget about as soon as it's over. But this Tuesday, this particular Tuesday, will be forever etched in my memory, a permanent scar on the timeline of my life. I came home from work a little early. I'd finished a big project ahead of schedule, and my boss, in a rare moment of benevolent leadership, had sent me home with a pat on the back and a "go enjoy the rest of your day." I should have known something was off then. Good things rarely happen without a cosmic catch, a fine print of impending doom you don't get to read until it's too late. I walked into our quiet suburban house, the one we'd bought together, the one we were supposed to grow old in, and I expected to find it empty. My wife, let's call her Sarah, usually worked later than me. She was a marketing executive, a real go-getter, always networking, always closing deals. Her long hours were just a part of our lives, a necessary sacrifice for the comfortable life we had built, or so I thought. But she was home. Her car was in the driveway, and as I stepped inside, I heard her on the phone in the living room. Her voice was different, a soft, purring tone I hadn't heard in years. It was a voice reserved for late-night whispers and secret smiles, a voice I thought was only for me. I stood there in the hallway, my work bag still slung over my shoulder, and I listened. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, not really. But there was something in her tone that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, a primal instinct screaming that something was wrong, that the familiar landscape of my life was about to shift in a very fundamental way. I couldn't make out all the words, just snippets, fragments of a conversation that didn't belong in our home, in our life. "I miss you too," she murmured, and my heart did a funny little flip-flop in my chest. "Last weekend was amazing." My mind raced. Last weekend. I was at a conference in Chicago. She was supposed to be at a spa retreat with her girlfriends. At least that's what she told me. That's what the carefully curated pictures on her Instagram story had shown me. Smiling faces, fluffy white robes, champagne flutes clinking together in a toast to female friendship. It was all a lie. The whole weekend, the whole carefully constructed narrative of her life was a lie. I felt a cold dread seep into my bones, a chilling realization that I was a stranger in my own home, married to a woman I didn't even know. I backed away slowly, my footsteps silent on the hardwood floor. I didn't confront her. I couldn't. The words were stuck in my throat, a tangled mess of confusion and betrayal. I needed proof. I needed to see it with my own eyes, to have irrefutable evidence that my world was indeed falling apart and I wasn't just losing my mind. And so, I did something I never thought I would do. I became a detective in my own life, a spy in the house of love. I waited until she was in the shower, the sound of the water a convenient cover for my clandestine operation. I went to her laptop, the one she always kept password protected, the one she guarded more fiercely than a dragon guards its hoard of gold. I'd always respected her privacy. I'd always believed that trust was the cornerstone of a healthy relationship. But trust had left the building, and in its place was a gnawing suspicion that was eating me alive from the inside out. I tried a few passwords, the usual suspects. Our anniversary, her birthday, the name of our first pet. Nothing. Then I remembered a conversation we'd had a few months back, a drunken, late-night confession about her first email address, a silly, embarrassing name from her teenage years. I typed it in, my fingers trembling so hard I could barely hit the keys. And just like that, I was in. The screen lit up and I was staring at her desktop, a seemingly innocent collection of work files and family photos. But my gut, my newly awakened, screaming gut, told me to dig deeper. I went to her cloud storage, a shared account we used for backing up our photos, a digital archive of our life together. I scrolled through the recent uploads, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. And then I saw it. A folder innocently labeled Weekend Getaway, the same name she'd used for her supposed spa retreat. I clicked on it, my breath catching in my throat. And there it was. My own personal horror movie, playing out in a series of high-resolution images and crystal-clear videos. There were dozens of them, hundreds even, a meticulous documentation of a secret life I had no idea she was living. There were pictures of her with a man I'd never seen before, a handsome, generic-looking guy with a smug smile and a gym-sculpted body. They were in a hotel room, the kind with beige walls and forgettable art, the kind of place where secrets are whispered and promises are broken. They were laughing, drinking, kissing, their bodies intertwined in a way that left no room for interpretation. There were videos too, short, intimate clips that made me feel like a voyeur in my own life. I saw them having dinner, their hands clasped across the table. I saw them walking on a beach, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. I saw them in the hotel room, their clothes in a heap on the floor, their bodies moving together in a dance of betrayal that was both mesmerizing and repulsive. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, a physical reaction to the emotional gut punch I had just received. I wanted to look away, to close the laptop and pretend I had never seen it, to go back to the bliss of my ignorant existence, but I couldn't. I was a moth to a flame, drawn to the very thing that was destroying me. I kept scrolling, my morbid curiosity a driving force. And then I found the other folder, the one that really sent me over the edge. It was labeled with his name. Let's call him Chad, because he just looked like a Chad. And inside this folder was a collection of his personal photos, a gallery of his shirtless selfies, each one more ridiculous than the last. He was in a bathroom, flexing his biceps in the mirror. He was on a boat, his chest puffed out like a proud peacock. He was in a gym, his face contorted in a look of strained exertion. It was a shrine to his own vanity, a monument to his inflated ego. And my wife was his willing accomplice, his digital cheerleader, his secret admirer. I felt a strange mix of emotions as I stared at those pictures. There was the blinding rage, the all-consuming jealousy, the soul-crushing sadness. But there was something else too, a flicker of something dark and twisted and undeniably funny. The sheer absurdity of it all, the cliché of the shirtless selfie, the pathetic attempt at seduction, it was almost comical. It was like a scene from a bad romantic comedy, except this was my life, and the joke was on me. I spent what felt like hours in that digital rabbit hole, piecing together the timeline of their affair. It had been going on for over a year. A whole year of my life had been a lie. A whole year of her smiles, her kisses, her I love yous had been nothing but a performance, a carefully crafted illusion to keep me in the dark. And the guy, this Chad, he lived over 2 hours away. How did she even manage that? The logistics of it all boggled my mind. The late nights at the office, the weekend work trips, the sudden emergencies with her friends, it all started to make a horrifying kind of sense. I had been so blind, so trusting, so completely and utterly clueless. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was a fool, a naive, unsuspecting fool who had been played for a year. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. The sound of the shower had stopped, and I could hear her moving around in the bedroom, humming a cheerful little tune. The disconnect between her carefree humming and the wreckage of my life was so profound, so jarring that I almost laughed. It was the laugh of a man who had lost everything, a man who had nothing left to lose. I walked out of the study and into the hallway, my face a mask of carefully constructed neutrality. She came out of the bedroom, wrapped in a towel, her hair still wet from the shower. She smiled at me, a bright, beautiful smile that had once been the center of my universe. "You're home early," she said, her voice laced with a sweetness that now sounded like poison. "Yeah," I said, my voice hoarse. "Just a slow day at the office." She walked over to me and kissed me, a light, fleeting kiss on the lips. It felt like being kissed by a ghost, a phantom of the woman I thought I knew. I could almost taste the lies on her tongue, the bitter aftertaste of her betrayal. I wanted to scream, to rage, to throw her laptop against the wall and watch it shatter into a million pieces, just like my heart. But I didn't. I just stood there, a silent statue of a man, my mind a whirlwind of pain and confusion. And in that moment, in the deafening silence of our shared lie, a single thought began to form, a tiny seed of an idea that would soon blossom into a plan. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. I wasn't going to let them win. I was going to find a way to take back my power, to turn their sick little game on its head. And I was going to do it in a way that was so unexpected, so unconventional, so utterly and completely funny that they would never see it coming. The first act of my personal tragicomedy was over. The stage was set, the players were in place, and the curtain was about to rise on a second act that would be anything but predictable. The game was on, and I was about to change the rules. The fool was about to become the jester, and the joke was about to be on them. The days that followed were a blur, a surreal out-of-body experience where I felt like I was watching my own life from a distance, a detached observer in a play I no longer wanted to be a part of. I went to work, I ate my meals, I went through the motions of a normal life, but it was all a facade, a carefully constructed performance for an audience of one, my wife. On the inside, I was a raging inferno, a chaotic maelstrom of emotions that threatened to consume me. There was the anger, of course, a white-hot, all-consuming rage that made me want to punch holes in the wall and scream until my lungs gave out. It was a primal, visceral anger, the kind that comes from a deep, profound sense of betrayal. It was the anger of a man who had been made a fool of, a man whose trust had been shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Then there was the sadness, a deep, bone-crushing sorrow that left me feeling empty and hollow. It was a grief for the life I thought I had, for the woman I thought I loved, for the future I thought we would share. I would find myself staring at old photos of us, from a time when her smiles were genuine and her eyes were filled with love for me, and I would feel a wave of sadness so profound it would knock the wind out of me. It was a mourning for a past that was now tainted, a present that was a lie, and a future that was a gaping, uncertain void. And then there was the jealousy, a green-eyed monster that gnawed at my insides, that whispered poisonous thoughts into my ear in the dead of night. I would lie in bed next to her, her body warm and familiar beside me, and I would be consumed by images of her with him, with Chad. I would picture them together, laughing, touching, sharing secrets. I would imagine his hands on her body, his lips on hers, and I would feel a surge of jealousy so intense it was almost physically painful. It was a self-inflicted torture, a masochistic ritual of imagining the very thing that was destroying me. But amidst this toxic cocktail of emotions, there was also a strange, dark humor, a morbid sense of amusement at the sheer absurdity of it all. It was the absurdity of her lies, the cliché of the long-distance affair, the ridiculousness of his shirtless selfies. It was the kind of humor that you find in the darkest of times, a coping mechanism, a defense against the overwhelming pain. I would find myself laughing at inappropriate moments, a bitter, cynical laugh that was more a sob than a sound of joy. I would look at her, so blissfully unaware of my discovery, so confident in her deception, and I would have to stifle a laugh. The sheer audacity of it all was almost impressive in a twisted sort of way. I became a master of deception myself, a skilled actor in the theater of my own life. I would smile at her, kiss her, ask her about her day, all the while knowing that her day probably involved sexting with her long-distance lover. I would listen to her complain about work, about her boss, about the traffic, and I would nod sympathetically, all the while thinking about the real source of her stress, juggling a husband and a lover who lived 2 hours away. It was a twisted, exhausting game, and I was playing it with an Oscar-worthy performance. My nights were the worst. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. I would lie awake for hours, my mind a relentless carousel of obsessive thoughts. I would replay the videos in my head, analyze the pictures, dissect every word of their secret conversations that I had found. I became an expert on their affair, a scholar of my own betrayal. I knew their favorite restaurants, their inside jokes, their pet names for each other. I knew things about their relationship that I shouldn't have known, things that were slowly poisoning my soul. I started to notice things, little details I had been blind to before. The way she would guard her phone, the way her face would light up when she received a text message, the way she would suddenly have to work late on a Friday night. It was all there, right in front of my eyes, a trail of breadcrumbs leading to the truth I had been too naive to see. I had been living in a fool's paradise, a carefully constructed illusion of a happy marriage, and now the curtain had been pulled back to reveal the ugly, messy reality. The idea of revenge started to consume me. At first, my thoughts were dark and destructive. I imagined confronting her, screaming at her, exposing her to our friends and family. I imagined sending the pictures to his wife if he had one and watching his life crumble just like mine had. I imagined burning all of her belongings in a giant bonfire in our backyard. But then I would think about the consequences, the legal trouble, the emotional fallout, the sheer ugliness of it all. And I realized that wasn't who I was. I wasn't a destructive, vindictive person. I was just a man who had been hurt, a man who wanted to regain some sense of control in a situation where I felt completely powerless. And that's when the idea of a funny revenge started to take root, a way to expose her without destroying myself in the process. I started to spend my sleepless nights on the internet, my search history a bizarre collection of funny revenge on cheating wife, creative ways to expose an affair, and legal ways to mess with your unfaithful spouse. I found some truly ridiculous ideas. There was the classic glitter bomb, an all-you-can-eat buffet of glitter that would haunt them for weeks. There was the idea of signing them up for every mailing list imaginable, from cat food subscriptions to adult diaper delivery services. There was even a suggestion to hide a bunch of fish in their car's air vents, a smelly, lingering reminder of their rotten behavior. I even read a story about a woman who sold her cheating husband's prized sports car on eBay for 75 cents. Another one who put up a billboard with her husband's face and the words cheater on it. While these ideas were amusing, they didn't feel right. They were either too childish, too petty, or too likely to land me in some kind of trouble. I needed something more clever, something more personal, something that would hit them where it hurt, their egos. And that's when I remembered the folder of his shirtless selfies, the digital monument to his own vanity. And I knew I had found my weapon of choice. It was perfect. It was personal, it was funny, and most importantly, it was his own creation. I wasn't going to have to fabricate anything. I was just going to have to recontextualize his own pathetic attempts at seduction. I started to formulate a plan, a multi-layered, meticulously crafted masterpiece of a prank. It was a plan that would require patience, precision, and a healthy dose of audacity. But I had nothing but time and a burning desire for a little creative justice. The first step was to gather more information. I needed to know more about this Chad, this two-dimensional character who had inserted himself into my three-dimensional life. I did some online sleuthing, a little digital digging that made me feel both like a creepy stalker and a brilliant detective. It wasn't hard to find him. His social media profiles were public, a carefully curated highlight reel of his supposedly amazing life. He was a personal trainer, of course. His Instagram was a nauseating collection of gym selfies, motivational quotes, and pictures of his perfectly sculpted abs. His Facebook was filled with pictures of him at parties, surrounded by a rotating cast of attractive women. He was the epitome of a cliché, a walking, talking stereotype of a man who cheats. And the more I learned about him, the less I hated him and the more I pitied him. He was just a sad, insecure man who needed the validation of a married woman to feel good about himself. My wife, on the other hand, was a different story. The more I learned about her secret life, the more my anger towards her grew. She wasn't just cheating, she was living a double life, a carefully constructed web of lies and deceit. She was a master manipulator, a skilled actress who had been playing the role of the devoted wife for over a year, and I had been her unsuspecting audience, her captivated spectator, her fool. The plan started to take shape, each detail more delicious than the last. It was a plan that would not only expose them but would also give me a sense of closure, a way to reclaim my narrative and end this chapter of my life on my own terms. It was a plan that would turn my pain into a punchline, my heartbreak into a hilarious anecdote. I was no longer the victim. I was the writer, the director, and the star of my own revenge comedy. The stage was being set for the final act, and I was about to deliver a performance that they would never forget. The jester was about to take center stage, and the joke was about to be on them, in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. And I couldn't wait for the curtain to rise. My plan, my magnum opus of humorous retribution, was a thing of beauty in its intricate design. It was a multi-pronged attack on their egos, a carefully orchestrated symphony of embarrassment that would play out in both the digital and the physical world. It was a plan that required the patience of a saint and the cunning of a fox, and I, a man who had been living in a fog of betrayal for weeks, suddenly found myself with an abundance of both. I was a man on a mission, fueled by a potent cocktail of righteous anger and a newfound appreciation for the absurd. The centerpiece of my plan, the star of the show, was of course Chad's collection of shirtless selfies. Those glorious, cringeworthy monuments to his own vanity were going to be my primary weapon. But I wasn't just going to leak them online or send them to his friends and family. That was too simple, too pedestrian. I had something far more creative in mind. I was going to turn his pathetic attempts at seduction into a public art installation, a testament to his douchebaggery that would be impossible to ignore. I started by downloading all of his shirtless selfies from my wife's cloud storage. There were dozens of them, a veritable treasure trove of narcissistic absurdity. He had a whole repertoire of poses: the classic bathroom mirror flex, the pensive stare into the distance, the "I just woke up like this" bedhead look. Each one was a masterpiece of self-absorption, a testament to a man who was clearly his own biggest fan. I spent a whole weekend in my garage, which I had turned into my secret revenge headquarters, meticulously preparing my art. I bought a bunch of cheap picture frames from a thrift store, the gaudier the better. I printed out each of his selfies in high-resolution color, blowing them up to an impressive 8x10 size. Then I got creative. I added my own personal touches to each photo. I used a glitter pen to add little hearts and stars around his flexing biceps. I wrote cheesy, inspirational quotes on them, things like "believe in your selfie" and "dream big, lift bigger." I even used a label maker to create little museum-style plaques for each frame, with titles like "The Thinker," "To," and "Ode to Bicep." My garage looked like a shrine to a particularly vain and slightly unhinged fitness influencer. The next phase of my plan was to find the perfect venue for my art installation, and I knew just the place: the local park, a popular spot for families, joggers, and dog walkers. It was a place where the whole community gathered, a place where my little exhibition would get maximum exposure. I planned to do it on a Saturday morning, the busiest time of the week. I would be a guerrilla artist, a Banksy of betrayal, my work a fleeting, yet impactful statement on the nature of infidelity and the ridiculousness of the male ego. But the art installation was just one part of the plan. The other part was more digital, more subtle, but equally devastating. I was going to use his own online presence against him. I created a fake Instagram account, a meticulously crafted profile of a fictional, fitness-obsessed woman named Gains-A-Lot Glenda. I used a stock photo of a ridiculously beautiful fitness model as my profile picture. I filled the account with pictures of healthy meals, gym equipment, and inspirational quotes about fitness and self-love. It was the perfect bait. I then started following all of Chad's friends, family, and clients. I liked their pictures, left positive comments on their posts, and slowly but surely I infiltrated his digital world. My plan was to use this account to subtly expose him, to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of the people who knew him. I would leave comments on his posts, things like, "Wow, you look just as good with your shirt on," and "My friend's husband sends her pictures just like this." It was a slow burn, a psychological game of cat and mouse that was designed to make him paranoid and uncomfortable. The final piece of the puzzle was my wife. I needed to create a situation where she would be forced to confront her own betrayal, a moment of truth that she couldn't lie or manipulate her way out of. And I knew just how to do it. Our anniversary was coming up, our 10-year anniversary. We had been planning a big party, a celebration of our love and commitment, a gathering of all our friends and family. It was the perfect stage for the final act of my revenge comedy. I continued to play the part of the loving, unsuspecting husband. I helped her with the party planning. I listened to her talk about the caterers and the decorations. I even went with her to pick out a new dress for the occasion. It was a surreal experience, living in this a double life, but I was committed to my role. I was the wolf in sheep's clothing, the jester in the king's court, and I was about to deliver the punchline that would bring the whole castle of lies crashing down. The week before the party, I put the final touches on my plan. I rented a small storage unit to hide all of my art and other revenge-related materials. I bought a burner phone to communicate with my fake Instagram persona. I even wrote a script for myself, a short, powerful speech that I would deliver at the party. I was leaving nothing to chance. The day of the party arrived, a bright, sunny Saturday, the kind of day that's meant for celebrations and happy memories. Our backyard was decorated with fairy lights and flowers, the tables were set with our best china, and the air was filled with the sound of music and laughter. Our friends and family were all there, a crowd of smiling, unsuspecting faces. My wife was radiant, glowing in her new dress, the perfect picture of a happy, devoted wife. She greeted our guests with hugs and kisses, her laughter echoing through the garden. She had no idea that she was the guest of honor at her own public shaming. I watched her from a distance, a strange mix of sadness and resolve in my heart. I still loved the woman I thought she was, the woman I had married 10 years ago. But that woman was gone, replaced by a stranger, a liar, a cheat. And I knew that I had to do this, not just for myself, but for the man I used to be, the man who deserved better than a life built on lies. As the sun began to set, I took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone that we had set up for toasts and speeches. The crowd fell silent, their faces turned towards me, their eyes filled with anticipation. My wife stood beside me, a proud smile on her face, her hand on my arm. She thought I was about to deliver a gushing, heartfelt tribute to our 10 years of marriage. She had no idea that I was about to detonate a bomb that would blow our lives apart. I looked at her, right into her beautiful, deceitful eyes, and I began to speak. "Thank you all for coming," I started, my voice clear and steady. 10 years. It's a long time, a decade of love, of laughter, of shared dreams. But it's also a long time to keep a secret. I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes, a tiny crack in her carefully constructed facade. The crowd murmured, a ripple of unease spreading through the garden. I had their attention. I had her attention. The jester was on stage and the show was about to begin. The punchline was coming and it was going to be a killer. I was ready. The fool was about to have the last laugh. A secret, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air, a heavy, pregnant pause that seemed to stretch on for an eternity. I could feel the tension in the crowd, a palpable sense of unease that had replaced the festive atmosphere of just a moment ago. My wife's smile had frozen on her face, her hand on my arm had gone rigid, her eyes were wide with a dawning horror. She knew. In that instant, she knew that her secret life was about to come crashing into her public one, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. I found out a few weeks ago that my wife has been having an affair, I said, my voice ringing out with a clarity that surprised even me. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. I could see the shock and disbelief on the faces of our friends and family, the people who had celebrated our love, who had watched us build a life together. It's been going on for over a year, I continued, my gaze never leaving my wife's face. I wanted her to see the pain she had caused, the devastation she had wrought. With a man who lives 2 hours away, a personal trainer named Chad. I said his name with a deliberate, almost theatrical emphasis, and I saw a flicker of recognition in the eyes of some of her friends, the ones who had probably been her confidants, her accomplices in her deception. I then pulled out my phone and connected it to the projector that we had set up to show a slideshow of our 10 years together. But instead of pictures of our wedding, our vacations, our happy memories, the screen lit up with a different kind of slideshow. It was Chad's greatest hits, his shirtless selfies in all their glory, each one accompanied by a cheesy, inspirational quote that I had added. The crowd erupted in a cacophony of gasps, whispers, and nervous laughter. It was a bizarre, surreal scene, a public shaming disguised as a party. I watched as our friends and family stared at the screen, their faces a mixture of shock, amusement, and pity. My wife stood beside me, her face ashen, her body trembling. She looked like a cornered animal, a deer in the headlights of an oncoming train. I wanted to be angry, I said, my voice softening. I wanted to be destructive. But then I realized that the best revenge is not to become like your enemy. The best revenge is to find the humor in the absurdity of it all. And then I did something that no one expected. I started to laugh. It was a real, genuine laugh, a laugh of release, of liberation, of a man who had finally let go of the pain and embraced the ridiculousness of his situation. And slowly, tentatively, some of the crowd started to laugh with me. It was a strange, cathartic moment, a shared recognition of the absurdity of human behavior. The party was over, of course. People started to leave, their goodbyes awkward and hushed. My wife had disappeared, vanished into the house without a word. I was left alone in the backyard, surrounded by the remnants of a life that was no longer mine. In the days that followed, the fallout from my little performance was swift and dramatic. My wife left. She packed her bags and moved out while I was at work, leaving behind nothing but a short, cold note on the kitchen counter. I haven't seen or heard from her since. I heard through the grapevine that Chad had also suffered some consequences. My art installation in the park had gone viral on local social media, and he had become a bit of a local celebrity for all the wrong reasons. His business had suffered, and his carefully curated online persona had been shattered. I don't know if they're still together, and to be honest, I don't care. My life is different now. It's quieter, simpler, and in a strange way more honest. I'm still healing, of course. The scars of her betrayal are still there, a permanent reminder of the pain I endured. But I'm moving on. I'm rediscovering who I am without her, and I'm finding a strength I never knew I had. My little act of revenge wasn't about hurting her, not really. It was about reclaiming my own narrative, about refusing to be the victim in my own story. It was about finding a way to laugh in the face of heartbreak, to turn a tragedy into a comedy. And in a weird, twisted way, it worked. I'm not sure what the future holds for me. But for the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to finding out. I'm no longer the fool. I'm the jester who got the last laugh, the man who turned his pain into a punchline, the star of his own one-man show. And I'm ready for my next act. I'm ready to write my own happy ending. The house is quiet now, and the echoes of her laughter have finally faded. But it's not an empty silence. It's a peaceful silence, a silence filled with the promise of a new beginning. And I'm embracing it with open arms. The curtain has fallen on my tragicomedy, but the story is far from over. It's just the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where I'm the one holding the pen. And I can't wait to see what I write next. Thank you for listening to my story here on Reddit Whispers. Now I want to hear from you. What's the most unexpected, life-changing decision you've ever made when everything seemed to fall apart? Share your thoughts in a comment section, because you never know, you might be the one that someone else needs to hear today.